it next live. I'm Shivani Gupta. Joining me right now is former India cricketer Deep Das Gupta, who's one amongst many of the fans who've been a little gloomy after the WTC final result. And Deep has obviously been in England and he's been commenting on the match as well. And there are so many questions, and some of them often repeated questions that have been thrown up because of another ICC Trophy Championship final that India have lost. Before this WTC final against Australia, Deep was on my show on CNN News 18. We talked about how we haven't won an ICC trophy in 10 years, and that question keeps getting thrown to the captain and the coach, and they're getting a little irritated. But ultimately, it has ended up in another heartbreak because you don't want to see your team get into these big matches and then not be able to get through that final hurdle. So today, as we look back at what transpired in that WTC championship match, Deep and I are just going to look at some of those questions. Now, that one question that is at the top of everybody's mind is there a slide, attitude, killer instinct problem? I remember, Deep, that I asked you this question about the statements that the captain and the coach were making. Rohit Sharma said, we've been asked this question over and over about their ICC trophy. Rahul Dravid, the coach, said that, we don't feel the pressure to win the trophy. I asked you, and I found it odd at that time. But do you feel like there's a little bit of problem in terms of how much of a killer instinct the team has and how it's approaching even these big matches?
Shivani, I wouldn't say that because this is the same team which won those test series in Australia against all the odds. This is the same team which almost won the test series in England last summer and the summer before. So I wouldn't say lack of killings because we've seen them win games. We've seen them win games where they were way behind. But obviously, I mean, there is something to it, as you mentioned, because it's not just winning ICC tournaments. Shivani, we haven't won an ICC knockout game in 10 years. So leaving aside the trophies, but a knockout game, that's more jarring to me actually than actually winning a trophy. So that's where I think, and it's a very difficult question to answer because I'm sure this is, and because we're talking about 10 years, so we are talking about good three captains here. We're talking about MS to a certain extent. We're talking about Virat, obviously, and Rohit. And we're talking about quite a few players who've played over the last 10 years. So, and a few coaches as well. So, obviously, it's a very difficult question. It's a puzzle which a lot of people have failed to kind of put together. So yeah, there is something to it, but attitude for me, I don't think that is or killer instinct is not one of the things that I think this team has lacked in the last 10 years.
The reason I ask this question is because a lot of fans feel like we don't care enough, or that, the players and the support staff is not making the right noises. They are not sounding like they're gung ho about going out there and winning an ICC trophy. Do you feel that that's just, reading too much into what they say, what they feel behind the curtains would be different? But unfortunately, the results are not coming.
You're absolutely right when you say they're trying to kind of balance it out. Listen, you've got to be nervous. You're playing a final of a WTC, you're playing a final of an ICC World Championship. So you've got to be nervous. You've got to be, wanting to get your hands on that trophy. But obviously, on the other side, you're also trying to keep everyone calm, the situation calm. We keep talking about taking this game like any other game. So basic idea has always been to kind of downplay big moments like these because as it is, you're feeling pressure. And on top of that, if you keep talking about, yes, this is important for us, we have to win it, blah, 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 it just increases those pressures on players and everyone else. So while I do understand that why they want to underplay or why everyone wants to underplay when they're in a situation like this, but they would definitely would be feeling the pressure. They would definitely would be, would have that hunger. There's no two ways about it. You know
Okay.
it as much as I do that inside that dressing room, the chat, inside the hotel rooms, the chat would be so much different.
Okay, it's important to talk about it because sometimes fans do feel that that hunger is not
Sure.
there because the lives of the top cricketers in India would not be impacted, and there are so many other pulls and pushes now which make them who they are and the superstars that they have, that, there are no consequences of losing, let's say, these big finals. As you very rightly said, we haven't even won a knockout in an ICC championship, right? In such a
Yeah.
long time. But is there a consequence of that? I think
Uh,
that's the question that would be on top of every fan's mind. And what happens after that?
that's a fair question to ask. That's a fair question to ask. But now this is how I put it. Obviously, as a player, you would want to win it. You would want it to be part of your legacy. But if you kind of comparing it, I mean, contemporary cricket with cricket in the past, it would seem like that. It would seem like that because, like you mentioned, a lot of it dependent on it in terms of your future, in terms of financial security, your security in the team. And does that security in the team mean as much as it used to be maybe 10, 15 years ago? So yes, those are very valid questions to ask, and those I think would be a good question to a psychologist, to be honest, and try and figure out, because yes, I mean, uh, what it meant, let's say 15 years ago, let's say pre-IPL, let's not beat around the bush, let's just call it
Yeah,
how it is. Pre-IPL, things were different. Yes, they were
yeah.
different. I mean, this is the only team you would play for your whole life, your whole career would depend on this. But obviously, like you said, things have changed so much post IPL. In terms of security, your future, your finances, a lot of it is different. But end of the day, do you still feel the same when you're playing for India? Yes, you do. Because after a while, especially I'm talking about big players, your legacies are based around not your franchise cricket, at least not as of now. I don't know how things will be 10 years or 5 years down the line. But as of now, your legacy, you'll still going to create playing for your country, right? Your legacy predominantly still be playing test match cricket. We still call our barometer for greatness is still based around performances in test match cricket. So for all these big players, I think it still is very, very important. It would still mean the same, playing for the country, achieving those things, because this is again part of their legacy as well. I mean, tomorrow, a lot of these guys would have played for 10 years, but when you ask how many championships have you won, they won't have an answer for it, right? So that would always be the difference.
So that leads me to the question of scheduling and how much importance are we giving to a WTC final. But I want to ask you, why is it that for now cycles we've managed to get into the final, and obviously we've had results under our belt. That's why we've managed to get to this final. But somehow we don't make it in the final hurdle. And the talk about what is going wrong. Now, I know I can talk about this test match. I can talk about the fact that after winning the toss, you did not bat first. That automatically shows that it's a slightly defensive outlook. There's been selection issues in test match after test match, and particularly in this test match, selection has come under huge criticism. You tell me, what is it that you see is going wrong? What are the problems and what are the solutions?
Right. As far as this particular game is concerned, and prep for a World TC final, and that if it happens in England, will always be challenging because it'll always be in June. It'll always be around this period. And if it's in England, then obviously you're coming straight after IPL and straight after 2.5 months of T20 cricket. And so my question is, can we look at it differently and say, does it have to be England? Does it have to be June? Can we or does it have to be just a one-off test match? Because how I'm looking at it is, gone are the days where in the with ODI World Cup, the first three were held in England, but then it moved on to other countries. Can we not look at it from that angle and say, yes, first couple of them fabulous, good, let's try and see if we can take it to other countries or not. Now you can always take it to a one of those teams who are playing. It would give more relevance. You could, rather than a neutral venue, you'll have people come in and watching. Now, ideally speaking, and very generally, there are 4 to 5 main teams who are vying for the finals. Obviously, India is one of them. Australia, England, New Zealand, and let's add Pakistan there as well. So predominantly 4, 5. Now, can we play apart from, let's say, India, Pakistan, leave that aside, but can we play in home of one of these countries? Yes, you can. For example, even if you want to play in July, you can play in South India, you can play in Sri Lanka, right? You can play in few places in South Africa as well, Durban and all. You can still play there. But then can you not push it to, let's say, September, October? Now, there
Hmm.
are 250 over ICC tournaments, the Champions Trophy and the World Cup. Can we not, kind of get only one of them and have a World Test Championship in that place? Because that's also scheduled after every 2 years, if I'm not wrong, somewhere around there. And that's slated to be in September, October. Why not have the WTC around September, October? Then you have more options then, and then it becomes and then you can play an actually a three-match series. So the other team will have the option or have the opportunity rather of coming back into the series. It's not a one-off game. So I guess you can look at that as an option. It's been wonderful so far. It's been interesting, but I think we can have a look at that as an option. And quickly for this game, could we have
Hmm.
done things differently? Could the team have done things differently? I guess so. I guess if you did come early, if you had enough people, just play a game or two. Game, because the biggest challenge is moving from one format to the other. Is are you match fit to be on the field six and a
Hmm.
half hours a day over 5 days? That is the biggest challenge because it's not just
But
about
you,
the skills. Yeah, sorry.
but you look at the example of Chiteshwar Pujara.
Hmm.
Now, he's not someone who's played the IPL. He's had time to prepare for this one-off test. Even Ashwin, for that matter, has had a little bit more time than the others. It's another matter that he was benched for this test match.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, is that the only reason that we are not being able to do well? That we didn't have time before this test match?
No, no, no. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that's the only
Hmm.
reason. All I'm saying is
Hmm.
you want to be well prepared. Okay, now let's have a look at two major things, right? For
Hmm.
me, first is bowling on day one,
Yeah.
right? So if you look at the lens, I thought the first spell was good from both Siraj and Sami, but it could have been a little fuller. But when you look at those lens on day one, and you'd see those lengths were very good for white ball cricket because they were back of
Hmm.
length around that 7 meter, 8 meter mark. But in these conditions, in Test match cricket, you wanted to be a little fuller around that 5 meter mark. So that what tells me is you took a little bit of time from moving from white ball cricket to red ball cricket because second they bowled beautifully, right? Umesh bowled
Hmm.
beautifully. You could see that rhythm in him. He bowled, but on day one, Umesh wasn't there. I mean, after that first spell, didn't follow up. Umesh didn't follow it up. Shardul didn't follow it up. And the major reason was that length. So one is that. So length, white ball to red ball for me on day one. And then batting. Some of the
Yeah.
shots. So again, was that India trying to be a little more forceful or a little more proactive than required? Were we playing too many shots? I mean, you mentioned about of Pujara. I mean,
Pujara.
ramp shot. When was the last time you saw Cheteshwar Pujara hit that shot? So
Yeah.
even though he wasn't, I mean, he wasn't playing IPL or he wasn't playing T20 cricket, but is that an effect of the environment? Is that the effect of how you wanted to approach day five, day four, and day five, rather the fourth innings? So those are things that tells you, you need a little bit of it's a mental change of mindset. It's not just
Hmm.
basically technique and all because these guys have played what 80, 90, 100 test matches. So they've had enough experience. But moving from one format to the other is the change of mindset, change in how you're approaching, and you got to do it over 6.5 hours every day
Hmm.
over five
Hmm.
days. It's not just about an hour of doing it. So that's where I think India could have maybe
Hmm.
played a 3 day game just to get into that mindset. Just waking up every morning after bowling 15 overs on day one, go back on
Hmm.
day two and bowl another 5 overs in the first hour or so. So get that body used to it,
Okay.
and that's that. Yeah,
No, so that leads us to the question then of what do we do with this scheduling issue? And now
yeah.
a lot of fans are also wondering that, BCCI is the richest board in the world. It has so much clout. But does it care enough for the WTC final? Because as it stands right now, the WTC final comes after an IPL. The IPL is almost non-negotiable as far as Indian cricket is concerned.
Mm.
It is something, it is a showpiece for the BCCI for obvious reasons. And is the BCCI giving the WTC final enough weightage and enough credence for them to
Mm.
care about and solve these issues? Because if they were on board, surely they can solve these issues, the ones that you're talking about, when the WTC final happens, where it happens, whether it's a one-off test match or a three-test match series.
Hmm. No, I definitely think BCCI cares enough. I think BCCI
Hmm.
does care about it, does care about Test match cricket because if you look at Test match cricket, there are only a handful of countries who are actually serious about it and doing something, or in a position to do something and are doing something about it. Obviously, BCCI and India is right up there. So I've got absolutely no doubt about how seriously it's been taken. But again, like I said, there is a certain format to it and you've stuck with that format. That format has worked to a certain extent. I think WTC as a concept is a brilliant concept, and should carry on with it. And now slowly you got to look at some of the other options. It's not a perfect format as yet.
Hmm.
It's a great initiative, really good one, but it's not perfect. I think it's about time now that you start looking at some of the other options because it's
Hmm.
fine. I mean, you know that this format works. You know that this concept works, and it's done a good job. But now it's time to refine it, and I think those questions will be asked now. And listen, Shivani, as it is, you know it like more than anyone else. I mean, all this power and everything else. As it is,
Hmm.
BCCI has got a pretty bad name in world cricket that they use it way too much, which is unfair,
Yeah.
I think. And but so it's you've got to do it, but you've got to do it subtly, I guess. And I think that should happen, and I believe that will happen.
Okay, I think you're right. There will be some thinking and evolving of the WTC format. As a mention, Rohit Sharma did seem to bat in favor of a three-test match series. Sachin Tendulkar has said this in the past. But of course, you could argue, you had Pat come in say that, this is how it is, this is how finals are played. That Olympic title goes to that, one 100-meter sprint. There are no multiple sprints to decide, but of course, you build up to that Olympic sprint over a calendar of athletic events. And similarly, this is what it is. And he said, this is what it is. So there is a difference of opinion already emerging as to what it should be. But we leave that aside. I want to come to the fundamental issue. People are very upset and unhappy, as I said earlier, that heads don't seem to roll. There are no consequences. We've been talking about dead weight in the Indian team for quite some time. There are certain individuals whose form has come into question. But event after event after event, we don't really look beyond that. Have we stopped making tough decisions, Deep, as
Hmm.
far as Indian team selection is concerned? And as some of the former cricketers were also indicating that, individuals have become bigger than the team themselves.
Oh, I mean, uh, I think it's a little unfair to say individuals have become bigger than the team. Are we not taking tough decisions? I think we are. I think you dropped Cheteshwar. I think uh, you you kind of obviously dropped Ajinkya, brought him back. You dropped Ashwin from the Test match. I mean, he's ICC number one Test bowler. I mean, that's a big decision. But in terms of okay, if let's not beat around the bush. I guess one of the names we
Hmm.
want to talk about is maybe Virat and a Rohit, those big names there,
Rohit
right?
Sharma, yeah.
Yeah. So okay. I mean, listen, they will have to take a call. I think both of them individually will have to take a call. In terms of how they see it, where they see themselves, and
Hmm.
ideally speaking, then there needs to be a conversation between the selectors and the players, and say, listen, what
Hmm.
are you planning? This is what we are thinking, because I think they've deserved and they've earned that conversation, if
Hmm.
that's the case. And because it's also a fair question to a certain extent or fair conversation to have, because it's the end of a cycle in terms of test match cricket. Let's take one format at a time. I think there's an indication in T20 cricket that
Hmm.
the selectors are going to look at a younger lot, which is coming through. So that is, leave that aside. Let's park it for a timing. Now that another cycle of WTC has ended and has stopped, I think that conversation needs to happen and say, okay, 2 years to go. what are we doing? And then I think at, at the same time, because India also plays fair number of test matches, not as much as maybe England does. England plays around what,
Hmm.
18 to 20 test matches a year, but we around play 14 odd test matches as well.
Hmm.
So if we can start prioritizing some of the test series, and also at the same time, by prioritizing, you kind of groom the next lot coming through, or the next set of players coming through. I think that would be ideal. For example, there are two test matches in West Indies. uh,
Hmm.
do you want the same team to play? Do you want all of them to play, or do you want to start kind of grooming a few names that are there and see how they perform at this level at Test match cricket? Things like that. So I think it can't be overnight and say, let's drop this and whatever and get rid
Hmm.
of all these names. I think it has to be a gradual process, and all these names and all these they've achieved so much. I think they
Hmm.
deserve and they've earned that conversation, and to a certain extent to be part of this process of moving on.
No, fair enough. I don't disagree with that. But do you see someone who's like a ready captured material in the longest format? Who takes over
Sure.
from Rohit Sharma? Actually, in the T20 or even in white ball cricket, there is a ready transfer, and we can see that happening with
Yeah.
Rohit to Hardik Pandya. But in the Test arena, is there someone?
Listen, first of all, in I think in Test match cricket, Rohit's been really good. If you look at his
Hmm.
numbers, I mean, obviously,
Hmm.
even this Test match, he was batting beautifully in the second innings. But in general, if you look at Rohit and how he's batted and how he's performed in Test match cricket, he's been very, very good. I personally think England, Australia, obviously the second one he did, but England and all. So I think for me, Rohit should be there. I think he's still
Hmm.
got at least another cycle in him of Test match cricket, and I think
Hmm.
he's someone who's made that effort to be
Hmm.
successful in Test match cricket. I don't know whether that effort is kind of costing him his form in white ball cricket or not, but I think he's consciously made that effort over the last year and a half, to change his technique to do things which will make him more successful in Test match cricket. So I think he's extremely serious about this format, and I definitely think he's got another cycle him as a player and also as a captain. So I so f- to answer your question about captaincy, at this point in time, obviously there's no obvious names like you mentioned
Hmm.
in white ball cricket. There are, especially in T20 cricket, there is a name. But with Test cricket, I personally would like to continue with Rohit at least for a cycle.
But that brings me to the question I've been waiting to ask you. There's been a lot of criticism of his captaincy. Leave aside his form issues. His form is, comes and goes a little bit, but when he gets going, he's a beautiful player to watch. We've all known that. And also, there's been criticism of Rahul Dravid in the
Yeah,
setup. Like, you couldn't think of a better name than Rahul Dravid to get into the senior team. And we know what wonders he's done in the junior
yeah,
side. But has that worked? And sometimes it's almost like it takes you back to that old adage that the best cricketers are not always the best coaches or managers. It's another
mm,
matter that Rahul Dravid has done well with the age teams, right? But somehow his impact in the senior dressing room hasn't been anything to write home about. You look at our T20 World Cup campaign, you look at this. Ultimately, what matters on your resume is how many titles you won.
true. And I agree with it. I completely agree with it. When obviously, like you said, he's done a fabulous job with India A and the under 19 setup.
Mm,
Uh, there were huge expectations, and obviously, I mean, with Rahul Dravid, expectations would come.
mm,
But again, there are a couple of things I think which might not directly come under his purview, but I'm sure
mm,
as a coach, as a head coach, you would definitely have a say. Is the number of injuries? I
mm,
if you think about last 2 years, the number of captains, for example, before the World Cup, I mean, Rohit wasn't. He was injured. He wasn't
mm,
part of the team. I think before the World Cup last time, India's had got 6, 7 captains. There have been so many changes. Shikhar was
mm,
captain, then he was dropped. Within a
mm,
series from a captain to him being benched from the squad. So there have been so many changes. so I don't know. I mean, injury wise, you had, Shami and Siraj, and ideally, obviously, Bumrah hasn't played cricket for a year now. Nobody has a clue what's happening with his injury, what's going on. Prasidh Krishna. That the thing is, if you look at the top six bowlers in India, the four aren't available. So I mean, what's going on? The number of injuries, what's happening there? Shreyas Iyer, his back. So those are the questions again. I mean, yes, it's easy to look at Rahul Dravid and say, okay, the results haven't come. But if you dig deeper, I think there are a few more other questions as well. Like I said, I mean, he might not be directly involved, but I'm sure he would have a say. So those are the things that he need to change before anything else. Making sure you have the best possible 11, playing more often than not so many changes in captaincy, not many changes in squad. It becomes very difficult for a coach to coach. I mean, if you're coaching 30 guys over a period of 7, 8 months, you don't have a plan, so to say. There is no process in place because suddenly somebody's injured. You're planning with some of these guys, and two of them are injured. I mean, your plan straight goes out of the window. So those are the things we got to keep in mind and look at that injury thing. We've got to look at the medical unit or whatever. What are the reasons are? I'm sure there are good enough people to have answers to those questions. But one is that. But again, having just going back to that Rahul Dravid and coach situation, uh, it obviously hasn't delivered. And let's be very very honest. Last couple of years, uh, we haven't taken that step up, right, that we were expecting. We were still doing what we were doing even before that, right? We've been
Exactly.
doing, we
We
were doing,
haven't really upgraded from that. We were still there and thereabouts before Rahul Dravid. And he
yeah,
was
I
brought
mean,
in precisely to change that gear, right? To fix what was wrong in the post Virat Shastri era, which also
yeah,
got very criticized. And
yeah.
now a lot of people are saying that they weren't so bad because even the Rohit Rahul combined hasn't delivered anything.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, there needs to be it's not about individual. It's not about Rohit or Virat as captains. It's not about just Ravi Shastri or Rahul Dravid as coaches. I think a lot of it also depends on the chemistry and things because there's so many moving parts here. Like I said, the medical issue, resting
Yeah.
issue, form issues. Then maybe those big names. If you really want to, some of them, if you want to bench them, if you want to move on, who's going to do that? Is the selectors are going to do that? I mean, for example, one of the things that I thought might happen was, let's say, Riddhiman Saha coming in after. Obviously, I do understand. I completely agree how or what happened a year ago when Rishabh was your number one, and then you didn't want a 38-year-old as a understudy. You wanted a younger guy. That is understandable. But when things change so drastically, unfortunately, Rishabh, whatever was unavailable then I thought, would look back at that decision and say, you know what, we took that call, was right at that point in time. Can we not look back at it and say, you know what, let's get him back and see what happens? So things like that, I thought, you know, uh, like I said, could have been handled differently. It'll be interesting to see the team, the selected team for the T20s in West Indies. We've been hearing that we've moved on, and maybe there's a new
Yeah.
approach to that. Uh, is it really so? Are we going to do that? Are we looking at the younger lot coming through or next gen, or is it going to be this more of the same? So we'll have to wait and watch there. Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, the selectors do this from time to time in Indian cricket, where in some of the, let's say, less marquee tours, you do send almost a B side with a new captain. So all of that has been happening. The senior players get some rest, but somehow we still have this tendency of chopping and changing, and I think that's a remnant and a legacy left from the Virat era where even he used to be criticized quite a bit as a captain, where you didn't know what 11 is going to turn
Mhm.
up in virtually any
Yeah.
of the format, right? Even
Yeah.
within a series, they used to chop and churn
Yeah.
and all. And I
Yeah.
somehow feel for some reason that has continued a little bit under Rohit. I can't understand why. And that's why also there's a little bit of uncertainty of what they are thinking. We don't know
Yeah.
what they are thinking. So it's impossible for us to understand,
Yeah.
what direction is being taken. But I'll leave that aside very quickly. Final two questions. Ultimately, if we were to be blunt, Deep, you watched this test match from very close quarters. Yes, we've done well in England. Yes, we did well in Australia. Do we have enough talent though to win test matches in these Senna conditions? If it's a clutch game like this, for example, you look at our batting, it disappointed. You look at our bowling, it disappointed. I know Bumrah wasn't there, but in the batting lineup, you had everybody you could ask for, right?
Hmm.
So, should we just accept the fact that because we play so much on spin heavy wickets at home,
Hmm.
it's so lopsided when people come to India and play. We still get found out when we play in conditions like the English conditions. And this wasn't even, mind you, the worst of the English conditions during this test match.
Hmm. Okay, so let me put it this way. India, almost the same Indian team did well in England last couple of summers. Okay, forget the last summer, it was a one-off test. Almost the same team did well in Australia. But having said that, if you look at it, it was predominant the bowlers who did bulk of the job, right?
Hmm.
So the top order last 3, 4 years has not really fired. So even though
Hmm.
we've done well, because straight away you'd say, oh no, India's done well in England. We drew the series, we should have won that. We won two back-to-back series in Australia, but it was predominantly the bowlers who did a fabulous job. Even in
Or the
England,
late batting order.
I was coming to that. Even the late batting
Yeah.
order. I mean,
Yeah.
Bumrah contributed with the bat. Shami contributed. Shardul Thakur has been brilliant with
Hmm.
the bat. You had in
Hmm.
Australia, you had Washington Sundar, Rishabh Pant. These
Hmm.
guys who did bulk of the scoring, and so that's something that you really need to look at and say, you know what, last 2, 3 years are middle order, and that's where home pitches also come into the picture because you've got to get into I mean you've got to get that habit of scoring big runs, right? And so that's where you need to get into that habit. And we at home also, because we're playing on surfaces that might help the bowlers a lot more than the batters. Every now and then it's not a bad idea to have pitches where batters can score some runs. You
Hmm.
get into the
Hmm.
habit of scoring of 150 or double hundred, because if you see it, we haven't scored as many hundred as we used to. And these
In
and
fact, our average in the last cycle was one of the lowest of all teams. Our batting
See,
average.
there you go. If you look at our batters and their averages in last 3, 4 years, whether it's India or away, they definitely have come down. So it's not a bad idea, like you said, every now and then, just play on. For example, that last test match, we couldn't pick up, I mean, it was a draw against Australia. But
Hmm.
yeah, let's try and play on those pitches as well every now and then. Get the batters, get some runs, and get into the habit of, because you're right. I mean, even away from home, we play on surfaces which are, or test match cricket nowadays has become so bowling friendly on pitches, because
Hmm.
obviously you need those points, you need qualification for WTC and all that. As batters, at times you feel a little let down and say, you know what, when is the next time I'm going to get a pitch that I'm going to try and get 150? Because that's habit. Batting for 5 hours, batting for a day, it's
Hmm.
about habit. And yes, I mean those things will need to be looked at.
Okay, final question. I know there are a lot of plethora of questions. We've tried to take some of them, but there are so many things we can't even touch upon because there's so many questions and we don't know where the solutions are going to come from. But Deep, let me ask you finally, if there was one thing, WTC cycle is done. We've had our
Yeah.
disappointment. We can look at some of the positives, but there are a lot of questions in our face. But
Mm.
now there is going to be, of course, the ODI format that will take precedence. There's the Asia Cup coming up. There's the ODI
Yeah.
World Cup coming up. And fundamentally, the question remains the same. Can we get into the finals of these competitions and actually look like we deserve to win? That, we are
Mm.
here to win. We deserve to win, not just because we are India, but because we are playing so brilliantly. I think we haven't had that for a long time in
Mm.
any of these formats. So, what is it? What is that one thing that you would like to do or you would like to change, you would like to see happening? Keeping in mind, of course, that the predominant focus now for the next few months is going to be ODI cricket.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is try and make sure that I don't lose any more players to fitness. That's one
Hmm.
thing I would love to see happen, and make sure whoever's not fit right now is available for selection. Because even though we keep talking about our bench strength, when somebody gets injured or a couple of guys gets injured, you suddenly look behind you and like, where is it? Right?
Hmm.
Right now, we did have to, as well as Ajinkya played, but we had to go back to Ajinkya. We had to go
Hmm.
back to Cheteshwar Pujara, right? After being dropped. As good as they have been and good as Ajinkya played, I thought he was brilliant this test match. But ideally speaking, you would have wanted somebody else. Would wanted a
Hmm.
younger guy to come in, right? So those are things that you've got to look at, and that's something that I would be very, very particular going forward in the next 2, 3 months. I've got to make sure everyone's fit. I have a proper bench strength. I know I have a pool of players that I can look, kind of depend on or fall back on. That's one thing. And secondly, listen, Shivani, 2350 over World Cup. It's going to be huge.
Hmm.
That'll be huge for obviously Rahul Dravid as a coach. It'll be huge for a lot of players, maybe Rohit, Virat, all these senior guys. And yeah, things. I mean, it'll be a very, very interesting World Cup and India would be under tremendous pressure, playing at home, all these expectations, the fact that we've been talking about for so long. It's boils down to one thing. It's not about winning games. I think India has won enough games in last 2, 3 years,
Yeah,
but winning trophies. So I mean,
absolutely.
you can imagine the kind of pressure that all these guys would be under. And post 2350 over World Cup, things will change. If India goes on to win the World Cup, brilliant. All are, at least the monkeys of the back, and we'll be happy and all.
Hmm.
But if it doesn't, then yes, there'll be some really tough calls, and uh, we'll see few of those calls coming straight after it, maybe from the players or the selectors, either way.
Yeah. Let's wait and see what happens. Let's also wait and see what indications the selectors give us, even as far as the longest format of the game is concerned. If there is going to be a thought process after this, because one cycle has ended, another
Yes.
is beginning, and if some tough calls are going to be taken, and there's some roadmap that is put through. We'll wait for that. The really interesting conversation. Thanks a lot
Yeah.
for your time, and all the best to you as far
Thank you
as
so much.
commenting and doing your thing is concerned.
Thank you so very much. Thoroughly enjoyed. Hopefully, we could have. I mean, the result would have been different, but yeah, thanks again.
Goodbye.